Hey guys, just wanted to go over some things in JavaScript that we haven't been able to try yet. And I want to start with loops. We introduced for loops in class last time, but there's another loop that we haven't messed with, and that's the while loop. So I just wanted to show you that very quickly. Loops, I'm going to launch the developer tools here in Chrome. And loops you're going to find those in every programming language. And depending on the programming language, they may have different types of loops, but fors are pretty common. So are while loops. And so, whereas with for, we had this kind of complicated thing up top here. Let's see, as we introduce that, where we would declare a variable I equals 0. And then we say, as long as I is less than, less than 10, and each time we run whatever's in my for loop, I'm going to increase it. Let's do 5. I is less than 5. There we go. And so for this one here, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to write out to the console whatever the value of I is each time. So let's write that and let's run it and see what happens. It should count. It did. It counted from 0 to 4. And why did it do that? Well, it did that because the variable, we initialized our variable I to 0. And what the for loop is going to do, it's going to set the variable to 0 to start with. Then before it runs the code that's inside your for loop, it's going to say, has my condition been met? And the condition here is that I, this variable that we initialized, has to be less than 5. So the first time it is going to be less than 5, it's going to be 0. So it's going to run this code here. It's going to write 0 out to the console like it did. And then after it's done running whatever's in between my for loop curly braces, then it's going to increment I by 1. It's going to add 1 to I and store that value back inside I. And so each time it's going to do that, and it's going to spit out what I is. When I is 4, then it checks the condition. Yes, I is still less than 5. So write I to the console. But then it's going to increment I that last time, and it's going to set I equal to 5. And so when our for loop runs that final time, it says, is I less than 5? It's not. And so it exits the for loop and we're done. Well, you can do the same thing with a while statement. Is you're just going to have to set up some stuff ahead of time in order to do that. So here's what we're going to do with our why. We're going to with our while, we're going to define a variable, and instead of I, we'll call it n, just to have something different. And we're going to set it equal to 0, just like we set I equal to 0 up here in our for loop. Let me make this a little bit bigger just so you can see it a little better. So we set initialize our variable to 0. And what we're going to do, like I told you guys last time, I just want to remind you this. If you don't want to execute your code yet and you want to write more JavaScript code inside the JavaScript console, just hit Shift-Enter. And Shift-Enter will take you to the next line and let you write more code. All right. So what we're going to do here is just let me make sure that I get the syntax right for this, because I'll be honest, I use for way more than I use while. And so what we're going to do is while n is less than 5, we'll do the same thing we did above. While that's true, then we're going to, again, write out to the console whatever the value of n is, okay? So while that's true, we're gonna make that happen. But here's what's different about the while loop. Well, a couple of things. Notice one, if I'm having whatever variables kind of controlling my loop, I have to define that outside of the while loop. And then as far as the incrementing of that variable, if that's what I'm doing here is incrementing, then I'm going to have to put that inside my while loop as well. So after I write n out to the console, I'm going to increment n by 1. Now remember that n++ is the same as saying n equals n plus 1. All right, that's the same. It's just a shorthand way to write that. So we're going to say n++, and then we're going to execute this. So when we run it, we get 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and a little bit different. Looks a little different than the for loop. The for loop had an undefined return value. This while loop at the very end actually had a return value of 4, which was the last thing that it spit out to the console. So don't get confused about this last 4 here. That's just the return value from the loop, but it's not what we explicitly wrote to the console. We wrote exactly the same thing to the console, 0 through 4. Okay, so it works just like the for does in this case. It's just you got to set up some stuff outside, and you got to handle some stuff inside the while loop that was sort of included in that top for statement for our for loop. So two different loops. They work basically the same way. In most cases, you can use either one, whichever one makes the most sense to you. Like I said, people tend to sort of lean towards one or the other. They get familiar with one and they use it more often. That for me, that's the for loop. I just tend to use the for loop more, but to each their own. All right, so let's clear that out and move away from loops and talk about using ands and ors in our if statements, right? We introduced the idea of if statements. And, we could say something like, we'll have an age and we'll set the age to say 17. And so then we say, if age is greater than maybe say, what do we want to say? If your age is greater than, we'll do it by legal standards. Is it 17 now? I don't know. Do they consider you adult 17? I'm not sure. Is it 17 or 18? But anyway, we'll say if age is greater than or equal to 17, then we'll just spit out to the console.log welcome to adulthood. All right. Again, that's what the state says, not necessarily when someone is behaving like an adult. But anyway, that's legally, that's what's going on. Really should probably be before 17. But as far as someone behaving like an adult, but that's just my opinion. So let's hit enter. And sure enough, it says, hey, your age is greater than or equal to 17. So welcome to adulthood. And it spits that out. Well, what if we want to check more than one condition in our if statement? What if we want to print something we talked about an else statement. We could have else, we could print out console.log, enjoy your childhood while it lasts. There we go. All right. And welcome to adulthood because age is still 17, but now let's set age equal to 12, for example. And so we'll do that. We'll run the same code again. And this time it says, enjoy your childhood while it lasts because the age is not greater than or equal to 17. What if we want to do something when age is in a particular range? So it's not just greater than or less than or just one thing, but there's two conditions we want to check. For example, maybe we want to see if the person is a teenager, okay? So let's set age equal to, we'll leave age at 12 right now, and we'll say if age is greater than or equal to 13, and, all right, remember when we did some of the Boolean logic stuff, we had these and or gates and things like that. So when you and two values together, both values have to be true for the entire statement to be true, okay? So if age is greater than or equal to 13 and age is less than 20, then we're going to say in that case, console, we'll just write out the word teenager there, okay? And we could have, kind of like we were when we did before with the else. We could say else if age is less than 13. We'll say in that case, console.log child, and then finally. Last one, otherwise, if it doesn't fall in any of those categories, then we're going to say that this person is console.log adult. All right. So hit enter. Your age is 12 right now. And so it says you're a child. But let's change age to equal to, let's change it to 13. All right, let's rerun our code. I want to clear this out. I hit Control L every time I'm clearing the console. I want to hit my up arrow button to kind of go through previous statements that I've made in the console. And so I'm going to pull up my if else statement again. Now that I've set age equal to 13, I'm going to rerun it. And now it says that the person's a teenager. We could go all the way up to 19, age equals 19. And we could run our code again and it still says as a teenager. But once I set age to anything greater than to 20 or greater, age equals 21. Now, when we run our code again, let me clear it out so we can see it. Here's our code. Now it says adult. All right. So you can use two ampersands, two and symbols together to say with your statements in your if, I want this and this to be true. Now, and's not the only thing that we tend to do in conditional statements like this. We also want to say if this or this is the case, then we want this to happen. All right. So, well, I don't know. Let's say, well, we'll just keep with the age thing, right? So age is set to 21 right now. And we could say if age equals 12, or let's see, what I want to do. Let's see. Well, let's just say this. I think there's this term preteen for 12, but let's say we're going to say that 11 or 12 would classify as a preteen. Maybe it does. I don't remember. Maybe preteen is any of those double-digit years. I don't know who comes up with these categories, but let's say if age is equal to 10, all right, or age is equal to 11, or age is equal to 12. Now we've got this new category, and we'll say console.log preteen. There we go. All right. And we'll just, that's all we're doing. We're just checking to see if the person is a preteen. All right. So right now, what is the age? I want to type in age. Age is 21. So if I run this code now, it should spit nothing out because the age is 21. But let's see, what if we make the age equal to 12? All right. Now let's run our code again. Let me clear the console. Age is set to 12. We run it again. It says, hey, you're a preteen, because if age had been 10, 11, or 12, it's going to flag it as a preteen. Our code's going to run, right? That's going to meet our condition. Now, that may be a weird symbol to you that we're using for or there. When I first learned this, it was called the pipe symbol. I don't know if there is another more technical term for that, but it's basically, it looks like a straight, just a line up and down. All lines, I guess, are straight, but it's a vertical line. Let me say it that way. A vertical line, and it's just above your backslash key on your keyboard. So it's this key right here, the key that has that on it. If you hit the shift button and then hit that key, it will display the symbol that we use for ors. And you have to have two of them in there to mean or, just like we had to have two ampersands for it to be an and. We got to have two ors in order for it to be an or, okay? Or two of the pipe symbols in order for it to be an or. Now, there was one other thing I wanted you to notice, because I can't remember if we've talked about this before or not. I think we did, but I just want to reiterate it. Notice here, when we're checking to see if it's a particular value in our if statement, we don't use if age is, let's just say we were going to do if age is 12, right? If age is 12, then we're saying, then what if we were to say almost alert, no, not alert, console.log, almost a teenager, all right? And then so we have something like this, if age equals 12, almost a teenager, all right? We hit enter. It says, hey, the age is 12. You're almost a teenager. Is that really what age is set to? It is. But watch what happens when I do this. What if I set age equal to 11? All right. We're going to run our code again. If age is equal to 12, you're almost a teenager. Let's try it. Age isn't 12 now. It's 11. But it says you're almost a teenager. Why did it do that? Well, because we didn't use double equals right here. And when we don't use double equals, what we're actually doing is we're setting age to the value of 12, right? Single equals is used for assigning values. We're checking to see if it is that value. And so since this just assigns it, it always turns out to be true, and it doesn't matter what age would be, it would always run this code here. All right. So what we want to use in order for it to work correctly is we're going to say if age double equals is 12. Now, I had just set age to 11, but since I ran the code, it set it to 12 again. So if I check it now, it's going to say it is a teenager because age is 12. But now if I set age back to 11 and I run my code again, then it doesn't do anything. It just gives me the undefined return value. It doesn't actually spit anything out to the console. Okay, so that's using ands and ors in conditional statements. The last thing I want to talk about today, so that you can have some time to kind of play around with this before the next time we meet, is I want to talk about objects. All right. JavaScript has some built-in objects. We can create objects on our own, and I don't really know if we're going to do that in this class. That's probably something that's more of a topic for next year if you take the web development class. But as far as objects go, there are some built-in objects that JavaScript provides for us. And there's actually one object we've already been using that the browser provided for us, and that's the console object. So whenever we call console .log, we're accessing an object named console that the browser provides for us, and that's why in the JavaScript console here, when I do console dot, it says, hey, there's a whole bunch of things that you can choose. These are all of these things are either functions. I'm sorry, either methods is what they call them when they're hanging off of an object. They're either methods or properties of the console object. And so what we've been using is a method, which is the log method. And so whatever string we pass into the log method, it will write it out to the console. All right. There's another method that is the console.clear method. So the way we were using Control-L to clear our console, we could also type in console.clear, run that method. And when I hit enter for that, it clears my console just like Control-L does. So there are some other there are some other methods hanging off of the console object, all right? But what we typically just use is the console.log method. But I want to introduce you to a couple of other important objects. And like I said, objects will have both methods and properties. What's the difference between a method and a property? Well, I'm going to use a very commonly used JavaScript object to explain that, and it's the math JavaScript object. Now, if I want to use the math object, all I have to do is type in the word math. I have to type it in with a capital M because JavaScript is case sensitive. So this object is named math with a capital M, and when I type that in and hit a dot, you'll see all of these possible properties and methods that we can use that's hanging off of this math object. So the way you would access this methods or properties, you type in the object name, then dot, okay? And then whatever comes after that will either be a property or method that you're using for that object. So a property, whenever you access a property for an object, you don't use parentheses. You know how when we're using console.log, we always have parentheses after it, and then we pass in whatever text we're going to display, right? Text to display, okay? So that's a method because when we call log, we put parentheses and then pass in some value to it, okay? Or in some case, or we don't have to necessarily pass in a value. It's actually not going to explode if we don't pass in a value to log, but because it is a method, we have to use the parentheses when we call it, okay? So if I do that, it just doesn't print anything out because we didn't pass anything to it. If I pass in 1, it prints out a 1. But properties, you don't use parentheses. And so a property that we might be interested in using with the math object is the pi property, right? So maybe we're doing some math calculation and we need the value of pi. Well, there is a property hanging off the math object named pi. Both letters are capitalized, capital P and capital I. And if I type that in and hit enter, then it's going to print out the value of pi. All right. Of course, it actually keeps going, but that's as far as it's stored in JavaScript here. That's as many decimals as pi goes to. So that's a property. No parentheses used for that. There are also methods where we use parentheses in math. And so just to give you a couple of examples of that, for example, the math.floor method. All right. So what does the math.floor method do? Well, it takes any number that you pass into it, and if it's a decimal number, it's going to return the lowest, the integer as you head down from that decimal. So for example, if I type in 10.1, we'll type that in, it's going to return 10, because as I go down from 10.1, the first integer that I run into as I'm counting down from 10.1 is 10. All right. So it's the lowest integer. There's also a ceiling method off of the math object that will give you the integer that you run into as you go up from that decimal. And so if I do math dot, and it's not spelled out ceiling, it's just CEIL. Again, the console helps you with that. When I do dot and type in C, or you can just kind of scroll through here. When you type in dot, you can look at all these functions, all these methods and properties that are available to you. But if I begin to type in C, I can see some of the methods. And so I'm going to choose ceil here. And then if I do 10.1, the integer that it's going to run into as you go up from 10.1 is going to be 11. So it returns that. There's also a round function. Maybe we want to round a particular number that's passing. So if I do 10.1 and I round that, then it rounds that down to 10, right? Just like we would expect it to. But also, if we round in math, if it's 0.5 or higher, if we do 10.5, what are we expecting that to round to? Well, that's going to round up to 11. Okay, so you can look at the math object, you can check that out on your own and see some of the properties and methods that are hanging off of that. It can be really useful at times, depending on what you're trying to do. I think there's a square root. Let's see, math.sq. Yeah, if I do square root right here, I can do 9, and it'll tell me that the square root of 9 is 3, right? So you'll find a number of useful functions. Useful methods. You'll learn eventually why I'm saying function, because the way that we declare these methods hanging off of the object is we declare them as functions. But anyway, that's to be discussed at a later date. So that's the math object. Just for your information, W3 Schools has information about these objects. You're going to read about it in your book, but if you just want to see what all's out here, you can go to JavaScript. You can probably just look for JavaScript math object and go to W3 Schools, and here it is. And it'll kind of give me a little some sample information, and it'll tell me the properties that are hanging off of it. So here's all the properties that are available. And for the math methods, it'll start listing a bunch of methods that are there. So there was one I thought that kind of presented that in a more concise manner. But anyway, this has some exercises if you want to play around with the math object and check that out. All right. Let's see. Let's see if I just go to w3schools. JavaScript. Let's just see where that takes me. JavaScript objects, and let's see if there's a bunch of objects hanging off of there. Everything it talks about. No. Well, bummer. JS math. So I guess if I go right here, that's the same thing. It is. All right. I thought there was something that would kind of show you all of the methods kind of lumped together instead of breaking them up into individual methods that they're going to discuss here. That there was one that was kind of all inclusive, but I'll try to track that down for you because I was pretty sure that was available somewhere on W3 Schools. Let's talk about another object that can be useful, and it's the string object. If you define a string, so let's declare a variable, and we're just going to say my name. All right, my name equals, and I'm going to assign to my name Jamie. All right, so when I hit enter here, my name, and I can type my name again, and sure enough, it contains a string named Jamie. Well, if I do my name dot, look, now there's a bunch of properties and methods hanging off of my name, because string is another object that JavaScript provides for us, and it provides some useful properties and methods for the string object. One of the properties that you might find useful is if you want to know how long a string is. All right, so my name has 5 letters in it. So if I want to actually call, there's actually a property named length hanging off of off of that string object, and it'll tell me if I do my name dot length, it'll tell me that it's 5 characters long. Maybe I want to see what the third character is. in my name. Again, this is maybe some string that a user has passed into you and you're trying to examine something about it. Maybe I want to see what the third character is. I could do my name dot care at, all right? And I want to check the care at position 2. Why 2? Well, because we start counting at 0. So if I want to find the third character, it's going to be 0, 1, 2. All right. So 2 is the one I want to look at. When I hit enter, it tells me that the third character in the value, the string that's stored in the my name variable is Elm. Okay. So there's a bunch of useful methods hanging off of that would be worth your while to check out. Like I said, you could go here, my name dot, and you could just kind of look through some of the things that it provides out of the box. You can replace parts of a string. That's something that I have used a lot. Split that string into smaller values. Maybe you have a string that's actually a full sentence and you want to get all the individual words. And so maybe I would split that sentence by spaces so I can get to all the individual words. Substring will let you do things like, I want to grab the first 5 characters of it. So maybe you have a bunch of strings and you want to abbreviate those or whatever. So you could use substring for that. So some cool methods hanging off of the string object. Again, you know, W3 Schools has some information about that. You're going to be reading about it in the book, but somewhere here, sorry, I should have looked this up before. Oh, here we go. Strings, JS strings, and it tells you some of the things. That is a little tutorial on that, but the string methods gives you kind of a breakdown of some of the useful methods and gives you an opportunity to try those. Now I want to talk about one more object today and another useful object, and that is the date object. All right. So this is the last one I want to talk about, and the reason I want to discuss the date object, because there's some other useful objects in JavaScript. The reason I want to talk about that one is because you create a data object a little differently than we've done these other objects. Notice with the math object, you just typed in math dot and you accessed it. With the string object, we had to actually create a string first, and we could just create a string and write it to a variable. I think you can even do. Let's see. Let me just make sure this is right. I think I could have done. Let's see. Let's do my son's name. So if I do Josh.length, I could just type in the string as a string and do that string.length, and it knows it's a string object, and it'll let me use the properties and methods hanging off of that. But the data object is a little different. Okay, you have to use what's called the new keyword. So some objects, in order to use them, requires the use of the new keyword. And so if I want to use the date object, I'm going to do something like this. I'm going to do var dt. I'm just going to abbreviate my date as d2, and I'm going to say equals new. And I'm going to type in the name of the object, which is the date object. All right. So it's going to create a new date object, and it's going to store it in this variable dt when I type this in. D is capitalized in the date object. So just keep that in mind since JavaScript is case sensitive. And when I hit enter, now I've got an object, a date object assigned to that dt variable. So if I type in dt dot, I'll see there's a bunch of properties and methods hanging off of that. All right. Now, if I just do get date, that is I happen to know that's a method, so I'm going to have to use parentheses in order to get that. If I type in enter, sorry, if I type in the parentheses after get date and hit enter, then it tells me 17. The reason it tells me 17 is because what the get date method does is it returns the current day of the month, right? So today, April the 17th, when I'm recording this video. And so that's why it returns 17. All right. Now, right now, it's around 9:20 at night while I'm recording this. So there's some other things that we could do. I could do date dot get. I could get the hours. So if I go down here to get hours and hit parentheses, it says 21. Why 21? Well, it's giving me the hours in 24-hour time instead of 12-hour time. And so 9 o'clock at night, if you were using military time, would be 2100, right? So it tells me that the hour at 9 o'clock is 21, okay? If I check the minutes right now, I could do dt.get minutes. And if I check that method, it tells me that it's 22, It says that it's 9:22 right now. All right. So, which is interesting to me because that is not the time, quite the time that it says on my computer. It's off by a couple minutes. I'm not sure why that is. If I just type in DT, we can actually see an expression of what the full date looks like right now. It's Sunday, April the 17th, 2022, 9:22 and 42 seconds right now. And it even tells me what time zone I'm in. So you can do some wacky stuff with time zones. You know, this JavaScript can handle multiple time zones. So if you're writing a web application that's going to be accessed all around the world, and you're doing something that's relevant to the user's local time, then you'll have to use methods like this to convert between, you know, whatever time that you're in whenever you wrote the code and the time that the user's in whenever they're running the code. So that can be helpful as well. So anyway, those are the three objects that I wanted to introduce you to. There's a lot that you can learn about that. That's going to take you several pages through the chapter in the book and give you an opportunity to play around with that. I'll definitely give you an assignment and give you an opportunity to turn something in that shows that you've used those and actually read the text and tried those objects out. Also, something that lets you use the and the or and the if statement, and maybe I'll throw in something about a while loop in the homework assignment as well. We'll see. But anyway, hope you have a great day, and I will talk to you later.